Hello patrons, and welcome to the updated tutorial on my headpieces. This is going to be quite a long and detailed step-by-step tutorial. A wig that you are happy to use as the base is the first thing you'll need. I would suggest not using any longer than shoulder length because it is quite hard to style or brush the wig once the feathers and the ears are all sewn and glued in. If you can find a wig that has this sort of lace style netting underneath, that is going to be great because it's nice and easy to sew into. The next thing we want is some shirring elastic, so you can get this in black or white, whatever's going to be closer to the color of your wig. This is the base of a fascinator in a teardrop shape. You can get it at different millinery stores. I'll put some links in the description below. For the clear string, I tend to use a fishing wire because it's very thin and very strong, and it's almost invisible. A really good sharp pair of scissors is always a must. And for the ear base, I essentially have a piece of cotton poplin fabric, which I have sewn into this sort of shape. Inside it here, I have a piece of core flute which I have cut out. And of course, you will need tons of feathers in the colors that you want to use. I try and get a couple of smaller feathers and some larger, wider feathers. And while it's not mandatory, it is nice to have some thinner, floppy feathers, which will help blend between the wig and where the ears are and the forehead crest. To get started, I'm going to take the clips off the back of this fascinator base, and then I'm going to cut the outside rim off just to make it a little bit smaller so it fits neatly on the forehead of my wig. Now, because this wig has a fringe, I want to cut off the part right in the middle so it's not going to get in the way of the fascinator base. We're going to hand stitch the fascinator base onto the front of the wig here. I tend to start from the center and then do 2 separate stitches towards the outside just to make sure it's nice and even. My favorite kind of glue to use on these wigs is this contact adhesive here. It's very strong and often used by leather workers, but it is fumy, so I have to make sure I use it in a very well ventilated space. You can get away with super glue or hot glue as well. I'm applying this glue just behind the stitches underneath the fascinator base where it's going to be pressing against the wig, and I'm going to secure this with a couple of extra stitches as well just to be on the safe side. I'm going to put a little bit of this glue on the core flute as well and then push it inside the poplin sleeve that I'm using for my ears. Next, it's time to sew the ears onto the wig itself. When stitching on the ears, I'm making sure to leave around ½ a centimeter between where the core flute ends within the sleeve and where I'm stitching onto the wig. This is just to make sure that the ears can naturally flap back and forth once everything else is attached. At the back side of the ear here, I'm going to apply a very thin, careful bit of glue underneath and press that down and cut off the excess. This will just help secure the ears a little bit further so it's both stitching and glue. Next, I'm going to cut around a meter of the clear string and then cut a 2nd meter for the other ear. I'm going to use a very large leather working needle and thread that right through the center of the ears, coming from the front to the back and then pulling the string back through again. We're going to tie off this clear string with a couple of good knots, and when cutting off the excess, just make sure you leave around 1 centimeter or 2 of that string. Later on, we're just going to glue it down flat against the ear before we cover the whole thing in feathers, just to give it some extra security. Using this same large needle, we're going to put a bit of shirring elastic in there, and we're going to thread this the exact same way as we just did with the clear string, except we're going to come from the back of the ear forwards and then back through, and we're going to tie that off at the back. Now you want to thread the shirring elastic down through the middle of the wig, about 3 centimeters back from where you sewed on the ear itself. And the aim here with the shirring elastic is to tie it off so that there's enough shirring elastic there for the ear to comfortably go back down, but not so much that it's tight and it's really hard for you to pull up on them with the clear string. You might have to use a bit of trial and error here and try it a couple of times just to get the right amount of tension on that elastic. Now the clear string attached to the ears is still loose, so we're going to thread our needle again with it, and we're going to push it down through the wig netting, just at the front of the wig on either side of where the forehead crest is sewn. A large needle is great for this bit because it will push a larger hole through that wig netting, which will make the string easily slide back and forth through that hole. Now this will sit either side of the cheeks, but we're going to thread it one more time slightly down through the stitching at the side of the face on the wig here. And that will just help the string sit slightly further to the side and away from our face, just to make it even more invisible. At this point the base is done, so I'm going to put it onto a mannequin head and give it a quick test run to make sure that everything is moving smoothly and everything is sitting in place. Now it's time to start on the feathers. So I usually use my scissors to cut the feathers into a shape that I like. And I tend to start on the tips of the ears and work my way down just so I can layer them up. You can see I'm using the larger feathers first and slowly working down to some of the smaller ones. And if I really want to make sure that I'm doing both ears evenly, I'll use some pins to prop up the ears while I'm working on them so I can compare them at the same time. I try and keep the back very simple because you want to make sure that it's still nice and flat and doesn't interrupt the movement of the ears going up and down. So I tend to use large flat feathers in simple colours, just enough to cover the cotton poplin. When doing the forehead part of the headpiece, I use the same principle, using the largest feathers first towards the back, slowly working my way towards the middle of the forehead. Now the bulk of the feathers are applied, I'm going to do a couple of big finishing pieces and then put in some of the smaller feathers, which will help add a little bit more texture and blend the feather areas into the rest of the wig. I'm using emu feathers and rooster feathers for this bit. And I'm going to be threading them in between a bunch of the other feathers on the ears, as well as down the sides of the head where the forehead crest stops and the wig begins. And I think I finished this one. I really like how it turned out. I hope you guys did too. And I hope you found this tutorial useful. Let me know if you have any questions in the comments below, as always, and thank you guys so much again for your support. And now it's time for a bonus round on how I can do this one on a headband instead of a wig. Full disclosure, I don't think this works quite as well on a headband as it does on a wig, but a lot of people have requested it, which is why I have it as an option. So I'm going to use this same fascinator base, but instead I'm going to cut out 2 smaller squares of it. You want the squares to be at least as wide as a couple of centimeters wider than the headband you're going to be using. You can always cut them a little bit bigger to start with and then trim them once they're glued onto the headband. The ears I'm going to sew on a line through the center of each of the squares. And just like with the wig, you can see I'm leaving a little bit of room to make sure that the ear can flap back and forth. Next is to attach it to the headband itself, so I'm going to glue up the area where I'm going to be gluing it to the headband. And I'm going to press the earpiece firmly into place and hold it there as long as I need to for the glue to dry. The stronger the glue, the better for this section because it does need to hold the weight, and with headbands you can't really sew the piece onto the headband directly. Once that's well and truly dry, we're going to attach in some clear string in the same way as you would with the wig. For this next part, I'm going to get a good quality ribbon and cut a tiny square of it and put a small drop of glue in the middle of that ribbon. I have a small silver bead here that I'm going to put in the middle of this square as well. And I'm going to make 4 of these. These are going to help guide the clear string down through the sides of the face. So I'm putting some glue at the front of the headpiece here, near where the clear string would naturally hang down. And I'm going to glue my little bead and ribbon part right at the front here, trying to get the bead itself quite close to the edge of that fascinator base section. Once the glue dries, I'm putting in some extra stitches at the front and back of where this ribbon is to sort of secure the bead into place a little bit more. And you can see how I've threaded the clear string down through both of these beads so it pulls out neatly at the side. Next, I'm going to add in the shirring elastic. I can do the same way as I would for a wig, just sewing it into the ear and into the back of the headband here. Now the base is all done, the ears are moving fine, and the next step is just to cover everything with feathers the same way as we would in a regular headpiece. Thanks again guys for sticking around for this extra section, and let me know in the comments if you have any questions.